I played Dead Island 2 at a special event in Amsterdam, thanks PlayOn for the invite. I played the Santa Monica Pier level, and I think this could turn out to be a great game. Now, I do have some worries though, some question marks. Like, I overall think that you should set your expectations right. I want to talk about that, and also share a ton of new info I learned by talking to the creative director on the game. Even with my limited time hands-on, I do think that Dead Island 2 seems to nail the most important thing, and that is combat. It just feels really good to smash a zombie with a big hammer or slice it with a katana, and the gameplay turned out to be way more tactical than I initially thought. It's smart to focus on one zombie at a time, prepare a heavy attack by holding the right trigger and then hit the enemy when they get close, use your kick or drop kick wisely to keep the enemies away from you, as you can get easily overrun when multiple charge your way. I was using the environment to control the battlefield, and I thought that firing a gun felt pretty great as well. It's a bit floaty, it doesn't feel as heavy as some of the melee weapons, but I still like the idea that you have to find the right moment to use these guns because the ammo is limited. So I really focused on headshots and only really used a gun when it was needed. Godfruit asked in the comments under my recent video if it was possible to have a build where you can only use firearms, so I asked the creative director. And the short answer is no, we should really see these guns as just an extra tactical option, but melee weapons are still the most powerful. We got 8 slots in our weapon wheel, and the creative director mostly had 3 or 4 of them as guns. Now, there are mods you can put on an assault rifle or pistol, for example, that makes getting ammo a bit easier, but for example, only using guns will be really hard for a full playthrough, as it's mostly a melee focused game. And I also found during my play session that actually combining both ranged and melee weapons was the best tactic. One of the bosses could regenerate health by eating corpses, so I was stunning him with my shot claw so he could not get away, and then when he would run away, I shot him to quickly make him stop regenerating health. I sadly have no footage of it. It was against the clown though, we did see in previous trailers, but really during this fight I had to use all my weapons and tools in order to succeed. So I was also using throwables like a Molotov to deal damage over time, and I really like how these tools have a cooldown, so the moment you find them, you always have them, but you have to wait a bit before you can use them again. I think it's a cool system. And by the way, if you like the video so far, then totally leave a like on it and subscribe, as I plan to do a full review and tips and tricks on the game as well. I was also switching a lot between the skill cards already, especially the abilities are really impactful, so you can choose to either have a dodge or a block, but you cannot have both of them at the same time. The ground pound is an ability, or the sort of slap that we also saw in trailers. I got to see some of the survivor cards that made the abilities stronger, like giving health back after doing a certain skill, while the Slayer cards were mostly passive bonuses, like giving a small damage boost when low health, or after hitting an enemy with a ranged weapon. And these cards would also just randomly drop from enemies, so I was always like looking around on the ground to see if I got something new. Weapons can drop here as well. I actually found a rival this way, so yeah, there seems to be quite some impactful loot. Some cards have this icon, so this means that they are extra strong, but also fill your autophage bar, which means that you become more of a zombie, so also get debuffs, like a decrease to your health, or it lets you take damage over time. So it's up to you if you think it's worth it. And while I did not try the Newman cards, I did learn way more about those as well. So the story is of course that you get bitten at the start of the game, and then slowly as the game goes on, you become more infected. This gives you access to the Fury mode, an ultimate ability that lets you go crazy on zombies for a limited time. And with the Newman cards, you learn new attacks based on things that Apex variants in the game can do, like Spit Caustic, or you can regenerate health while in the Fury mode, and way more. Like, there seem to be quite some cards and combinations, but I do worry that we will quickly find the best loadout and then just end up all using that. So, like, I'm not sure if there will be a ton of builds possible, or if you are pushed to try different things if you found the playstyle that works for you. And same for the weapons. Like, it was really fun to switch between all the things in my arsenal in the demo, because I was using them all for the first time, but I do worry that there's not a big enough, like, selection of weapons to keep it interesting 10 to 15 hours in. That you also here find the best mod and weapon combination and just use that throughout the whole game. Hope I'm wrong though, hard to say after this short play session. That's something I hope to figure out during the review process. If you have any questions that you would like to have answered in that review, by the way, drop it in the comments. John asked about the durability under my previous video, and yes, weapons can break in Dead Island 2, but when they do, you will not throw them away, but can just repair them and use them again. So the durability is more in the game to push you to try multiple things in your arsenal instead of just using one weapon. Conrad asked if there will be an endgame, and I learned that there will be side missions that unlock after finishing the main story. So as you might already know, Dead Island 2 is not fully open world, but there are 10 or so locations that you go through during the story, and you can then also go back to these locations later on as well, and then pick a different time of day. So the story mission is always either during night or day or dawn or dusk, but then when you return, you can choose a different time of day, which also impacts the zombies that roam the street. So how the enemy variety works is that for one, all the zombies will look different depending on the location you are in, which I really like, but also that you will encounter one of the Apex variants as a boss first, and after you defeat them, they will also roam the streets. So they can encounter them in new locations or the places you've already been to before, making them more challenging when you return. And these locations seem pretty sizable. I could still look at the map. There were familiar question marks for optional locations you can choose to explore if you want, which then might lead to a side quest or give you special loot. Like another thing you will be doing near the end of the game or after the story is hunt for certain zombie parts to craft powerful mods for your weapons. You get these parts from special Apex variants, and it also sometimes requires you to cut off a certain limb in order to have that specific part drop. It's kind of like Horizon or Monster Hunter. Now, of course, I haven't played around with this feature yet, but I think it could be cool. There does at least seem to be stuff you can do after finishing the main quest. I also asked about New Game Plus that JJ Jr. was curious about as well, and Dead Island 2 will not have it at launch, but they are looking into all kinds of stuff as they're already working on DLC for the promised Season Pass. A photo mode is also something they're looking into, although not 100% confirmed that it will happen, with outfits being something they are really working on, so we should see that in the future, with potential crossovers being in the cards as well, probably similar to the Dead Island 2 crossover we now see in Saints Row, so we should totally expect some post-launch updates for the game. One of the biggest critiques I've seen from people, and that I also agree with after having played it myself, is the amount of times your character talks and gives snarky remarks based on the things that are happening.
The Halperin Hotel. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
These are not very funny and they just happen way too frequent. Well, I now learned that you can actually completely turn these dialogue off if you want, so your character will be completely silent, which is great. We got someone asking about the FOV slider on console, and yes, the game will have that at launch, which is awesome, and it should also run at 60 FPS on the next-gen consoles, although I played the game on PC. Kesha asked about difficulty modes, and the answer is no, there are none. Everyone plays on the same difficulty, with zombies always being around your current level, and the creative director said that you can make the game more difficult if you want by turning off the UI. So then you really have to read your enemy without getting any visual cues. But yeah, the answer is basically no, there are no difficulty modes. The game will also not be more difficult when playing in 2-player or 3-player co-op, so it will basically be way easier if you go through the game with a partner or with 2 friends. I only played single player and will likely experience the game mostly solo, but yeah, I still think it's good to know. It's overall weird though that we still haven't seen any co-op gameplay whatsoever, so fingers crossed that it actually works. Again, I think we should go into this game with our expectations right. I think it will be a fun zombie melee title going through beautiful looking locations that you will probably play for a week or 2, then you've done everything and then you might not return, or maybe when big updates drop. I just don't expect it to reinvent the wheel at all or have an exciting story. I haven't seen anything that hints at that. So that's at least how I'm going to approach the game. And to be honest, I'm pretty excited to play through the full game because that combat feels so great. So I hope I can get an early code and prepare a review. I also have plans for spoiler-free tips and tricks around the release, so totally subscribe to not miss that. A like would of course be really awesome. You can check out my previous Dead Island 2 video by clicking on the screen with more important info that is handy to know, and I will speak to you soon. Goodbye.